What's been called the Poland Park, the municipal forest, for 100 years, Poland Woods has been right here at the end of College Lane. But this is anything but a dead end. I'm Tricia Perry for Vision of the Valley. It's nearly 100 years that this land has been a park, right?
That is correct, Tricia.
Tell me about the history of it a little bit, what you know of it.
The first gift of any land to become the Poland Municipal Forest was made in 1915 by the Poland Manor Company and Dr. Rose, who was in charge of the Kirtland Meadow.
Okay. And then when did the second gift come? Because it's not just a 50-acre park, it's much bigger than that.
It's now around 238 cumulative acres. And the next gift came from one of the farms nearby, and it was the Good Farm. And then and of course Mrs. Butler's gift of floodplain land as well as some other forest made a significant impact on this particular municipal forest.
Now, tell me why that's important, the floodplain part of it. That is sort of the reason it never got developed into a neighborhood, right?
That is correct. It would be very risky, it would be difficult on insurances, and I could not imagine who would want to build where there might be a flood.
Right. So instead, it was left to be this beautiful parkland.
Yes.
Now, when did this happen? This has your name on it.
Well, because of my husband's grandfather, Jack Zedaker, who was in charge of a National Youth Association segment that was in this area. And he and these young people built this pavilion in around 1940.
Wow. So, okay, so right now we're standing in this area that is pretty much the picnic area. And this is just about the only one in the park. There might be a few tables here and there in the woods. But
for respite.
Right, but this is the only place where you can really fire up the grill or start a little fire there and have a picnic. Why is it like that? Why do you think it's important that it stays sort of less picnicky and more walkable?
It's the natural beauty, and of course this does not detract from the natural beauty. And we have had another pavilion which is going to be rebuilt. It was a small, we'll call it a shed style,
right.
And just down the way where you see the picnic table and the fireplace. And that little structure was hit by a huge tree in a big windstorm. And the Bremner family, who originated the gift and the little pavilion, will be replacing it this year.
So you mentioned a couple things about this that maybe not everyone knows as well, like the garlic mustard pool. Isn't that what it's
Correct.
called? What is that? That sounds so foreign to people.
It does, but if you look in your yards, especially on the perimeter, you might have it. Happy to identify it for you. It's an invasive species, and if you rub the leaves between your fingers, there would be a slight garlic smell. This gateway was built by Roberts and one of our sons, John Zedaker, for his Eagle Scout project for Troop 44. It was a massive project. And to your right, you see what's left of a horse gate, which did have an opening gate to it. You could be on horseback, open it, and get through.
Right. It has had, when it first started, possibly tax purposes for firewood or lumber, but that kind of went by the wayside.
That's correct.
And now the attraction is wildflowers, right? Like
yes, the bluebells, most famous, the wonderful bluebells.
Which unfortunately we are not in the right time period for the bluebells right now. It's usually April, right?
That is correct.
2 weeks?
The cusp of April, May. And usually it depends on how wet, how cold, etc. the conditions have been.
So it kind of surprised everyone, I bet, when that first when the bluebells started to spread and that first blanket showed up. And
oh, isn't it marvelous?
It is pretty. And what does it mean to you personally? You mentioned several generations working for this woods out of the goodness of their heart and volunteering.
Yes.
What does it mean to you to have it here and to be able to work for it now yourself?
Well, it means that we're helping to preserve this, to make it available to people to enjoy at any age, groups of people, individuals. It's very, very important. While I've married a Zedaker who had a great commitment for generations to the forest, I understand it. It's tranquility. Forget the cell phone. Forget all of the things that you worry about before you enter this forest, because you can indeed feel most relaxed.
There's such a long history here, nearly 100 years now for this woods, and one of the people that knew a lot about that, who is no longer with us, unfortunately, is your husband, Bob Zedaker. Tell me what he's doing here in this picture.
Well, in the smaller photograph, he's standing where there was thought to be an Indian burial mound within the forest. And the geology department from YSU visited the forest and excavated all of the area that this was determined to be. They did confirm that there was not a burial site there, but they did find some artifacts, and I wish I could tell you exactly what they found.
That's okay.
But I don't know for sure, Tricia.
That's
I
right.
do know there were some fragments and things, and also arrowheads of significant size.
And he probably grew up in the park, didn't he?
He did. In fact, when he was in high school, he worked here in the summer. For Frank Thatcher. There's a Thatcher Trail. Mr. Thatcher was president of Carbon Limestone, and he employed Bob to work in the forest. The hollow sycamore, over 300 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And it's a great sight. Children love it, and Bob would give walks in the forest to preschool groups, and of course they were just tickled and delighted. Most of the class could fit inside the tree for a photograph.
I remember a while back, maybe 20 years ago, that maybe some people wanted to keep it a little bit quiet that it was here. Like
Yes.
maybe it wasn't something you really wanted to broadcast, and there was a little bit of a debate over should we keep it quiet or should we tell people what we have. And I think it seems like it's changing to the more let's celebrate and tell people what we have than it used to be. Besides this pavilion, there's also what I call the Green Bridge, which is really called the Mothy Bridge, right?
Well, you're correct because it is green, but by name it's dedicated to Mr. Mothy, who was then president of Sheet and Tube and very active on the Poland Forest Foundation board. So he had a keen interest, lived near the forest, and wanted to help beautify it. So I'm sure he had a large part in that span being built. The mayor appointed me, along with approval of village council, to sit on the forest board in Roberts Place. I'm now serving as chairman, as did he, with the grand support of a wonderful group of people who are charged with sitting on that board. And I did explain to them I'm not a Bob Zedaker, who was an amazing person regarding the forest and other entities, Boy Scouts, etc. But I certainly have tried to do my best, and I'm on the team, I'll put it that way.
Okay, so we're almost to the tree.
Yes, Tricia, and of course I can point out to our friends watching that you can tell that we're almost here because of the worn pathway that comes to the base of the big sycamore.
Everybody comes to this tree. It's such a cool thing to look at.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
And as you saw the picture of my husband posing inside it, which I'll strike the pose, Tricia. Isn't this?
Yes, that's good. This almost looks like a face to me. I'm always amazed.
Isn't it though?
Yeah.
the artist in you saw that. Yes,
Oh,
indeed.
I don't know about that, but yeah, it's beautiful.
It's an amazing tree. Bob loved it. Now, Tricia, you're taller than I am. I'm 5'1", and we saw how I scaled against the tree. And then you're taller. And Bob was much taller than you and bigger than us.
I know, it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere.
No.
Despite the fact that it's hollow in the middle. It's beautiful.
That's true.
You said 300 years old?
Oh, it's predicted by measurement of its rings and so forth to be more than 300 years old. I don't know if we call it part of what they often have referred to virgin forest, because essentially, I don't know what parts of this forest could be labeled that, meaning original, but this could be part of an original.
Right.
I'm not an authority to confirm.
So this and the bluebells,
Yes.
two of the attractions here, besides all the beauty that's already an
Yes.
attraction. Yes. What do you find the most fascinating thing about the history of these woods?
Of course, it relates to my house, and my house was where Jared Kirtland lived, and he was a very important Ohio naturalist in recording the earliest history of woodlands. And he did a Fish of Ohio, and he used Yellow Creek to do most of his early research. He found 48 different kinds of fish in this little creek down here.
But you are in one of those homes that is very close to the woods. You could walk here.
Right, and one of the reasons that we have always really loved living near here is that in the winter when we used to cross-country ski, you could put your skis on at the back door and come into the woods. And I think what makes this woods very special to people in Poland is that it is a part of everybody's, in the village, everybody's neighborhood. And so you duck through somebody or other's backyard with permission, and you're in the woods. Jim Bissell considers this the finest wildflower woods in Northeast Ohio and one of the 5 finest wildflower woods in the state of Ohio. So it could be better known, but in order to keep all of those wildflowers, of course, you have to stay on the path and, you know, respect the walking and picking and all of the things that you need to do about wildflowers.
We know it adds to life here in Poland, makes life better here in Poland. Why does it make your life better? What makes it improves your life because you're here?
I just think that we as a family use it with sort of as if it was ours. And when we come in the woods, we always see people we know. And it's just one of those really comfy places to be all the time. You know, it's not exactly the backyard. I mean, it's something you really care about. So I think it's really different from, except maybe components of the wilder parts of Mill Creek Park. It's very different from all of those other things. And yet it also, as I said, with the wildflowers being a real asset, it has sort of the best of having a nice little woodland. By it having been a municipal forest for almost 100 years, it means that everything is grown wonderfully. Trees have not been taken out like a woodlot. And so it is very majestic in its character.
some people, may consider as a trashy look, and we've got to clean up the forest, but there's a lot of things that even this, it's called coarse woody debris provides. We see various
touch it.
See various fungi that are growing that are breaking this down. Lots of bryophytes and mosses that are covering this. And if we were to able to lift this up, I can guarantee you that we're going to find lots of salamanders. And I was actually told, and I don't know if this is true, that salamanders contribute more biomass to vertebrate biomass than do things like deer and birds. There's a lot of amphibians that we don't see around here.
Wow.
Looking at this area, we've got various violet species. We've got some woodland goldenrods, which will be blooming later on. And as we just stand here, there's a magnificent basswood that I'm standing underneath right now.
I've never even heard of that tree before.
It's there's two species, Tilia americana, Tilia heterophylla, but basswood,
right.
Beech trees, right. Some people call them initial trees.
So wait, initial tree because you put your initials in it, right?
And we see some people that have already put their initials in there.
Yeah, very scientific. I like that name because it makes sense to me.
So this is, the genus for beech is Fagus.
Okay.
And this is, I don't mind pulling this out, we're not supposed to pull plants out. But this is dead, but this is actually, this plant never gets green. So we've got beech, genus Fagus. This is a parasitic plant called Epiphagus, or beech drops.
Oh.
So this is a plant, it's non-photosynthetic, so it taps its roots into beech roots and pulls its sugars and nutrients from there. I think Poland Village Woods has far more biodiversity. It's lots of different habitat types, lots of different plants and animal species that are co-occurring with unique habitats.
And you're not from here, so when you came here and began living here, were you amazed that this was here, or did you know about it?
Amazed, this is a gem. This is a plant that was introduced into Europe. It's actually fairly invasive. It's a bird-dispersed plant, like lots of other cherries, produces small drupes, and birds will disperse this around. Very prized. Nice that they haven't logged this area, but very expensive wood. You can tell by this dark, chunky bark. And you have black cherries. We've got a slippery elm right over here. Another, I call it a subcanopy species.
Why is it called slippery elm?
Good question, because the leaves are very, very rough. If you were to actually peel this bark back, it's very, very slimy underneath there. But one thing this is fantastic about, we were talking about native species, and we hear about, there's concern about native species. You look at this is a native species, and we've got some herbivory on this. We've got these little galls, and for each of these, the black cherries, the beeches, you're gonna find particular insects that like to use this to consume it, their larvae, and then those various insects emerge, and they do things out in nature. So this is actually good. I mean, I'd love to see herbivory, and you can see that these leaves are, there's lots of insect larvae. And we don't see a lot of herbivory. There's a tremendous amount of insects that are consuming this. There's birds. We hear lots of different birds. There's a group of birds called the Transgulf migrants that they winter in South America and breed in North America. And the main reason why they're coming up is we've got this tremendous productivity right here with all these insects that are going to be emerging, and these birds are capitalizing on that productivity. This is Pedicularis canadensis, which is it's a parasite, but this is called a hemiparasite. Well, it only taps in to the xylem of oak trees. We're standing behind a huge, beautiful, magnificent white oak. And so it will tap into the roots of oaks, and take various minerals, not the photosynthetates, not the sugars, so
Right.
it does produce its own sugars. But another parasitic plant, and there's lots of ways to make a living out in nature. All these beech shoots that you're seeing right here are very, very likely not from seed. But beeches are one of the few species where they will produce new individuals
from the roots.
From the roots, yep.
Oh, wow.
And if this thing, and I will, one comment on beeches, you could see that it's a large component of some areas of Poland Village woods. There is a disease that has been introduced, not native to North America. And I would say that that beech has probably succumbed to it. And in the coming years, unfortunately, a lot of these large individuals will die, but they will resprout. I would estimate, and this is sort of a guess, I mean, you may have 50 bird species at least breeding here. Lots of these, again, are tropical birds that are coming up, you know, to the temperate zone to breed. One of the very charismatic and ecologically important bird species that are very abundant here are barred owls. And there is probably at least resident 3 breeding pairs of barred owls, and those very, very distinct call. It's one of the few owl species that you can see all throughout the day and night. And so there's lots and lots of barred owls around here.
The history of this is that it was donated, and then Poland Village decided to always preserve it and kind of add to it a little bit with land. Is that, in your experience, unusual for a community to do that and be so devoted to a natural space right in the middle?
I would say very much so, particularly of the size and quality of this area. My understanding, about 265 acres, and which is quite large. And so yeah, just as far as the sheer area and the diversity of plants and animals found in here. One reason why we don't find a lot of garlic mustard, when I first came here in 2006, they had a Poland Village garlic mustard pull. It was 4 weekends, and they had small armies coming out here, students, high school students, and other volunteers coming out and actually weeding the forest. Garlic mustard's a very invasive species from Europe. And I was asked by somebody who said, do you think we're really having an effect? And you know, my opinion was absolutely. Over the years, those garlic mustard pools have become smaller and smaller to the point where in certain areas, it has actually been eradicated where it used to occur.
Which is why we can't really find any right now.
That's right.
And we can't find it.
Yeah,
I've
we'll
been
point
told
it out.
It might be in my yard, though. I think I've got some stuff
I have some in my yard. So this is a rather small snag. That is a standing dead tree, and we see that it has been lots of different holes, no doubt from woodpeckers that are using this not only to forage for insects that are using this as a food resource, but we even see some cavities that have been excavated where we might have woodpecker species living in here. These snags are very, very important to the avian community, because not only do we have woodpeckers living in them, but sometimes those woodpeckers, which are called primary cavity nesters, meaning they excavate their own homes, they will sometimes abandon particular holes, and you have other secondary cavity nesters that use those holes for homes, like nuthatches, black-capped chickadees, tufted titmice, things like that. So these really contribute to diversity in a lot of different respects. Not only insects, but also birds, for sure. Very important.
I look at it and go, oh, it's a dead tree.
And it's a dead tree.
It's got all this other stuff that goes with it that's wonderful. And
this is a plant that you would not want to run into. This is a stinging nettle, and you can even see all the different little spines sticking out of there, so you would not want to run through there, but it's a nice plant, one of our native plants.
okay.
And over here we have a very, very interesting shrub. It's rather common, and Very, very fragrant. You can sort of smell this.
It smells like spice, right?
It smells like spice and
does.
almost lemony.
So we don't use this in cooking though? This is poisonous?
It is, lots of plants are poisonous, and yet we find certain insects have overcome those chemical defenses to the point where they actually have to consume certain plants. This is one that's called spice bush, and it smells a little bit like sassafras. Very, very fragrant, very pleasant smelling. And there is an insect called the spice bush swallowtail, which is a butterfly that will,
oh wow,
very, very large. Later on in the season, you might find that these leaves, you don't find a lot eating this right now, but you might find some leaves, look underneath, and you find spice bush swallowtail larvae that are,
oh my gosh,
yeah, consuming. They're fairly common. So this is the spice bush swallowtail only feeds on spice bush and sassafras.
Is this as big as it gets?
They can get bigger. Yeah, it's a rather small, woodland shrub, very shade tolerant, but I've seen some that can be twice this size, maybe even 3 times.
So even though we see all of these ash trees that are dying all over the place, it's not necessarily a doom and gloom thing, right?
It's not necessarily doom and gloom because we do have a lot of saplings that aren't affected by the beetle. So there should be, I would think in generations to come, there's going to be lots of regeneration of ashes, and there will be a legacy of the emerald ash borer. We saw the beach snag down there and talked about the importance of snags. One positive is that it will contribute a lot to different dynamics in forest, including the avifauna that uses snags.
So this is like a big classroom to you, right? I mean, people come here for the beauty of it and as a destination to do recreational things, but it's also, they might not even know, a big classroom.
We actually I teach general ecology, and there's a field component to that, and we usually actually come to Poland Village Woods twice because there's so much to talk about. It's a really spectacular piece of property.
As we said, we missed the bluebells this time around, but that's not a reason to stay away from Poland Woods. It's a place that's spectacular all year long. For Vision of the Valley, I'm Tricia Perry.